Hey everyone, welcome back to Outpost Gray. If this is your first time here, welcome to the show. I am your host, Jack Scott, and what I try to do is every week, every other week, I try to provide you information in cybersecurity, technology, and innovation. Now, one week you're going to get an Outpost Gray post, which is the one that you're seeing right now. And the next week, you're going to get a Two Cyber Chicks podcast, which is with my co-host, Erica McDuffie. So our intent is to help you demystify cybersecurity and also provide you rich content for all individuals, either individuals trying to break in or experts that are already in this field. I used to do 1 hour live streams, but what I've done now is I wanted to reduce the time together, have a more intimate environment with the guests. And so now we're doing pre-records, and these shows are roughly 20 to 30 minutes long. So if this is your first time here and you're not part of the community, it would mean the world to me if you hit that subscribe button and you became part of the Outpost Gray community. It is a welcoming community. So make sure to message, comment below, let us know your name and you're a new person here so we can reach out to you. All right. So as far as our guest today, I'm really excited about bringing the guest on the show. She's actually a repeat offender. I met her a couple of years ago at the RSAC conference, and then we actually ran into each other at a networking event. And that we will talk about how we kind of like reconnected, but it took us a little bit. So our guest today is Tonia Dudley. Now, she is an experienced and trusted cybersecurity strategist. Most of her time has been spent working in and developing information security programs. So her prior position, she was actually the vice president of chief information security officer. She also has served as an executive committee member for the National Cybersecurity Alliance and as a board member of directors for the National Cybersecurity Society. She has various different awards. Some of those include Friends of Cells MVP and the Challenger Award, where she led the development of their cybersecurity awareness and their cybersecurity programs. She also introduced and expanded their incident response program. So it's not often that you meet an individual that has all of the full package, some of the technical side and also the soft skills. So you guys are in for a real treat, and I'm really, really excited to have Tonia back on the show. So without further ado, let's make this happen. Let's get our guests on the show. Woo! Welcome back. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. It was great. Yeah, it's great getting to reconnect with you. It was funny how we were at that CISO series David Sparks event, just a little meetup that he impromptu planned, and looking across the room, I'm like, she looks very familiar. And then we just started chatting, and then like, okay, now I remember why you look so familiar.
That was interesting, because you're like, wait a minute, you interviewed me, and then I'm like, you're right. That was anybody that's listening, if you haven't been to RSAC, definitely have to go. It's a real treat. It's great. I mean, we met there, reconnected. The community is so small here, and you just don't know the relationships you're going to build when you're at those type of events.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites. It's on my list every year.
I'll be back, so I'll be seeing you next year for sure. So let's dive into this. So you have a unique background in the fact that you didn't go into cybersecurity like in that linear route of graduating from high school, getting your degree in like information technology or data science or something like that, but instead you went into finance, then IT, and then you ended up in cyber. So I'm really curious to understand kind of, how was that journey for you going from finance, IT to cyber, and what were some of those challenges you faced to get you where you are today?
Yeah, so it's never really easy doing those transitions from one kind of profession to another. But right out of high school, didn't know what I wanted to do. Started working at a retail organization in their finance department, and just kind of bounced around every couple of years because I get bored. And once I learn something, I'm ready to move on, right? And so, and then at that same organization, many years in at that point, was able to get onto it was a Y2K project, right? Getting off the mainframe onto a client server environment for our payroll system. So that gave me that ability to be able to get involved with some type of an IT role. And so then from there, I was able to then go to another organization, a global manufacturing organization, doing IT. And after a few years there was this project that was started up called IT compliance that had to do with the Sarbanes-Oxley, what had just was new, right? And everybody was still trying to figure out what that meant. It was a combination between. It was the first time that really IT was involved in this finance regulation to keep everything, keep controls in place, right? How are we managing systems that affect our financial statements? So what was unique about that was being able to have my finance background along with my IT background. And so I did IT compliance for 5 years and then got to that, okay, I'm kind of bored, what's next kind of mode. And InfoSec was starting to bubble up and be this new trendy hot thing that everybody wanted to get into. And so I was able to transition into InfoSec doing policies and standards because I figured, okay, it's a lateral movement. It gets me exposure into the different elements because that, I didn't really know anything about InfoSec at that point. So it really gave me some good exposure to what that meant. I sat right next to the security architect team, interacted with them quite often, writing the standards, being able to understand what is going into the security standards and policies, doing firewall rule exceptions, which are always fun. I will never forget the first time the architect was showing me how to do one, right? And the website that somebody in finance wanted to go to was Apple Bottom Jeans. So to this day, every time I hear that song,
Oh my God.
I'm reminded of those security exceptions and a firewall request.
Apple Bottom Jeans of all things. God,
Right?
that is a song. I know Gen Zs are probably like, what?
Yeah, what? I still
What
hear
is
that song.
I do too.
Yeah.
They've got to keep even. Yeah, it's like it's never gonna go away.
No,
No, that
no.
is too funny.
Yeah.
Y2K as well. Like
Yeah.
that was a blast from the past. So were you in it when were you like? Did you guys stay up till midnight to make sure everything was functioning?
I don't know. I don't remember doing that, but just, we weren't doing anything crazy that
Yeah,
year for New Year's Eve, right? It was just, okay, we're just going to stay in the neighborhood and hang
yeah,
out with neighbors and not do anything crazy. Yeah.
yeah. Wait for a call. Cell phones weren't a thing then, so
No.
yeah, you had the beep 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 beep. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Oh my gosh, it's so
Right.
blast from the past. My dad was a computer programmer, and I just remember Y2K was just it was huge, and I was just like, "Why did nobody think that we were gonna make it past 1999?"
Right.
Like
Well, and let alone, it was the mission to get off the mainframe. And to this day, people are still using the mainframes,
they
right?
are.
Like they're
Yeah.
not ginormous, across, 4 football fields, but they're
Yeah.
still in the data center.
100%. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you're a cybersecurity strategist, and I wanna know, it's a kind of a two-part question. Can you take a moment and kind of explain what your day-to-day as a cybersecurity strategist looks like? Kind of like demystify that so we can kind of understand what your role looks like.
Yeah. So, having done all these years of doing various elements of infosec cybersecurity, and then building awareness programs, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit, but then having one of my vendors that I worked really closely with, had gotten to know them over the years, and I was getting ready to look for my next role, and they're like, maybe it's time you come here. And so one of the things that I really enjoyed about that role was being able to just help my customers with building their programs, right? Whether it's their awareness program, their phishing awareness program, their incident response with using the different solutions that we had, and just being able to have those conversations, but then also being able to help the product team and the internal teams understand what that's like at the enterprise level, right? To be able to give them that perspective of, well, that's not really going to work because that's not really how they operate, right? Or what is really important to them as you look at those updates to the product, or how we need to, make the product better or more efficient.
So in that role, can you tell us like the maybe three? I mean, that might be too little or something, but what are like the top three common mistakes that you have encountered in your role as a cybersecurity strategist that you see organizations tend to make when developing their cybersecurity strategies?
Oh goodness. So one of the things that we saw was because it was an email security company, right? And so there was a lot of focus on phishing, and we still see, we see the Mandiant M Trends report that still says phishing and vulnerabilities are the top ways that incidents are started. Still to this day, right? All of
Mhm.
these years later, those are still really the top things that we see. And so, what are the things that you can do to help with enhancing your program is enabling MFA, right? So, I know we're going to talk about security awareness in a little bit, awareness month, but that's why we still say enable MFA because credential phish is the top phishing threat that we see. And not only is it just credentials, but then if it is malware related, then they're leveraging those vulnerabilities to execute that malware. So if you can focus on MFA and authentication and access management, as well as vulnerability management, those are the two things that can really, really help enhance your program, right? Just to
Mm.
kind of minimize those threats, right? Just start with the basics,
Yeah.
and then you can work on getting nitty gritty into those things. And when you ask any security operations center, what's the top ticket type that they see? It's phishing related, right?
Mhm.
So, making sure that when you're running your phishing program, making sure that it's relevant to what you're seeing in your organization. Every org is different, but threat actors are agnostic to industry, right? So, it doesn't matter what you see hitting one industry. They're probably going to recognize that in another industry because they're not going, there are times when we do see them going after certain industries, but we can
Yeah.
also see those same indicators and threats across multiple industries.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's usually unless it's a targeted attack, which doesn't usually I mean, that happens, absolutely, but
Mhm.
it's usually a spray and pray. It's usually it's a numbers game with the threat actors, especially with these phishing campaigns. They're gonna try to get as many phishing emails out as they can because they already know that there's somebody that's going to click on it. Like you
Right.
said, it's still one of the number one. I was just talking to a friend yesterday at works at a bank, and he's like, "I'm just blown away that it's 90% still phishing." Like, meaning
Right.
90% still end users being usually the number one cause of how organizations are becoming breached and those vulnerabilities. So I love what you said, though. Vulnerability management is just key. A lot of these organizations don't understand it. So it's like, just remember the basics and then
Mhm.
education. And I
Yeah.
love like, you've helped organizations too with like phishing awareness programs to help. And part of that is like scheduling and conducting what you would call as a phishing campaign within an organization. I worked at a bank and they used to do it like quite often, and they were legit. Like they got me but I was only there for 4 days. I had just got on, and so I didn't think they were going to send me a phishing email. Learned
Right.
really quickly it's never happened ever again. Anything I suspect, I just send it to like phishing at whatever company I'm at. I send
Right.
it to their inbox, but it does help. I think conducting these phishing campaigns do help if they're done right. So what would you say on some of the benefits? Because there's mixed feelings. So, there's some naysayers on these like phishing campaigns. What would you say are some of the benefits of conducting these campaigns? And what would you say to maybe a naysayer that's like, oh, they're useless. Why it's just a waste of time?
Yeah. So one of the things that I loved to do was looking at data, right? And so I would look at the data across multiple customers, global, any size customers, right? And just understanding what was working and what wasn't working. And what we know and what we see is um, aligning those threats, like I mentioned earlier, aligning those threats to what is really happening in landing in your inbox. And
Mhm.
we also know that it can take up to 4 campaigns before they might actually get it and understand. So one of the things that I used to always recommend to people is um, do increase the frequency, right? So maybe you're just starting a program, so you should probably do it once a month. And then as your users start to get really good and they understand, they recognize those, then you can back it off. But then you might have some high risk areas like finance or HR who might need a little bit, still need to stay on that monthly frequency just because they're constantly being targeted. So just making sure that they're aware of what are the things that are coming into their inbox, right? So, but I would also make sure that just because you're not in finance doesn't mean you're not going to get that invoice fish, right?
Yep.
Because, as a manager, like I used to have a budget that I still would have vendors that I would have to interact with. So that, they might reach out to me saying, hey, I haven't paid, where's this invoice at? So just because you're not in finance doesn't mean you're not going to see those, but the frequency is there, right? So then really understanding what your organization is susceptible to and what your threats are. When we hear about the MGM, right? Like understanding that your help desk needs to really understand like what are the things that they need to be aware of, and how many other questions should they be asking, or how they authenticate someone who's asking for a change, right? So really just understanding what your organization threats are,
Mm-hmm.
what you're seeing real, right? And then, so you mentioned then what shouldn't they do? So one of the things that we always shied away from, and one of the things that I really pressed hard on, is making sure that as we were creating new templates, that they weren't sensitive in nature, right? So you're not talking about your benefits or any other legitimate programs in your organization, because then they don't trust you, right? Your phishing program is typically the most visible thing out of your whole security program, not your policies, not anything else. Because if you're hitting them frequently, then that's the thing that they're gonna know about infosec or cybersecurity, right? They're the ones that do the phishing the phishing campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
So making it a positive experience for them so that they understand the why behind it as well. I remember way back when I first was running programs, and I had somebody reach out and say that, they weren't trained on this. Why was I targeting them, or why were we targeting them? And so really just helping them understand that this was based on a real threat that we saw, and, maybe even show them the real fish that came in, so that they understand that, oh, we actually do get hit with those. Back in the day when, actually we still kind of see this, but probably not as frequently as we used to, is, hey, I need to, can you send me the W-2 file, right? So, that was kind of in that BEC, business email compromise category, because there was no link or no attachment, but it was a, hey, I need you to take an action for me. And back in the beginning, when we started seeing BEC, it was send me your W-2s. So as I would see that first one come in, then it would send out a reminder email to the HR and payroll team, hey, remember to watch out for these, report these things, right? So being really sensitive to those topics, and we would never create templates that had that sense of emotion that would going to, and that's typically when you when you dig into some of these um, um, social media outrages that happen. It's
Mm-hmm.
usually because somebody used a very sensitive topic, and that really taints the whole
Yep.
purpose and the effectiveness that we see with these programs.
Yeah. So with that, I want to segue that, because that is a really good point, especially on the sensitivity, like being sensitive as far as those phishing campaigns and not luring them too much within
Mhm.
that. Like, because we know that threat actors are going to socially are now starting to social engineer some of these attacks. Like, for example, I got one, it was a good one. It was from Robinhood. And
Mm.
I dabble on Robinhood. And it was like, what was interesting about it is that they obviously knew I was at Robinhood. So they got that information. So that was part of the social engineering, but they didn't have an actual click here if you didn't transfer this. So they're like, it was an informational email of like, hey, your $1,400 that you've requested is getting transferred over to this account. You have the 4 digits of the account. They're like, thank you so much, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, there's not even anywhere to click. So I remember scrolling down, and they were like, if you want to learn more information about this transaction or something else, but it wasn't, usually they come after with fear. Like, if you did not make this transaction, or this is incorrect, click here. It was the first time that I had seen that kind of like approach. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, that's a different technique. And
Yeah.
so, Yeah, they're getting smarter. So the social engineering piece is there, but however, when you're doing it to your employees and you weigh it too heavily on like, here are your benefits, and if you don't click now, your benefits are going to be canceled or something like that, and then it's a phishing email, like that's not doing anybody any favors, and you're
Yeah.
losing, like you said, that trust in the leadership, and it's just you're making people frustrated and angry, and then
Yeah,
they just
and think about that too from the HR benefits department, right? Now they're pissed off at you or upset with you, right? Because you've leveraged their annual thing that they spend a lot of time preparing to get to educate employees to sign
yeah.
up for their benefits, right? So that they don't miss out on signing up for their benefits. So also the worst time you could do any of that stuff is when they're actually doing those things. And it was never surprising to me when I would have somebody call me irate saying, "Hey, can you work with my team because they decided to send out an IT update simulation when we're trying to roll out a new technology," right? So you also have to be cognizant of just things that are happening in the business that you're not impeding them from just trying to
Yeah.
do the thing to roll out something new, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Valid. So, what would you say are the most important components of a successful cybersecurity awareness program for an organization? It sounds like communication is key.
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. What would you say if you could say the top three are the most important components of a successful cybersecurity awareness program for an organization?
When it comes to cybersecurity awareness, I think the first thing that you need to do is walk into your security operations team or your threat intelligence team and ask them, what are we seeing? What are the threats that our organization is dealing with? Because what it is for one organization might not necessarily be what's happening in your organization. So that's always the first place to start. So that way you can understand what are the types of threats we're seeing, what are the biggest types of incidents that we're seeing, where are we seeing employees having issues with certain technologies or certain behaviors that we're seing. That's really where you need to start. One of the things that I did at that global organization, going back to firewall rules, is we had we were trying to block uncategorized websites, right? So we use a web filtering service, and we decided let's block uncategorized sites because that's where a lot of phishing happens, right? There are new sites that get stood up, and so in that process, there was a banner that page that would come up and say, "Hey, this is the acceptable use policy. Are you sure you need to, go here?" But because that impeded the business at times, because there were legitimate reasons they needed to go there, there was always a click through, right? And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I did was got the team to give me some data around how many people are just clicking through that button, right? Just clicking through the website that they need to go to. And then change the banner on that page to have more of an educational feel, letting them know like, hey,
Mm.
this is an uncategorized site. These are typically where threats can enter our business through these types of websites. So can you go to this site and register this site, and then you'll get an email once it's registered. It usually happens within an hour. Just simple messaging, and then kind of a link to an education video that kind of talked about that. And then had a section that said, if you need to get here right away because of emergency, right, because you need to do it for your business, do that, but then come back and register your site. We
That's
saw
smart.
a dramatic decrease in the people that were clicking through and people that were registering their site. And then, at the time we were using Yammer, and somebody even posted, "Hey, this is great. It actually told me what I needed to do." So that made me feel good that somebody actually recognized that it helped them do the right thing, right? So I think the more you can find ways to disrupt their behavior to do the things the right way, right? How can we use technology, right? Because they have a day job, right? Their job is to write journal entries, to
Yeah.
publish reports, right? Their job isn't to know security. That's our job. So how can we help enable them to do things more securely? One of the things I used to always tell the security analyst in the SOC was, you don't know how to trade a journal or write a journal entry or do those things. So it's not always a user
Yeah.
a fault, right? Because they just
Mhm.
don't know that's not their day job.
Yeah, that's such a great point, and that's really smart how you did that. Because one of the biggest things with, like, putting too much security in place is that the end user, the employee, will figure out a way around it. So if you make it too secure, and you had it secure, but you provided them a way to have that education to understand why it was secure, while at the same time allowing them, if they were, in a time pack, because you think about it, you're trying to get to a website to get information, then you see this warning, you're like, oh my God.
Right.
Yeah, it's like that whole thing.
I
Like,
don't have time to call the help desk or do
right.
whatever, right?
Yeah. But you gave them an option, and it's like you're working with them and it works out. I feel like that's a great approach. Very, very brilliant. Okay, so we are in one of my favorite months, October, not because of Halloween, but because it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Woo woo, big nerds. So, with that said, all the news feeds, all of our Instagrams and LinkedIn and Twitter and all the things are like flooded with all the cybersecurity-ness. What would you say is a great way to raise awareness right now around the importance of cybersecurity during this month?
I think just talking about it in general. So one of the things that I posted on LinkedIn the other day was, it's one thing to, we always want to have it, take it home, right? Take it, if your employees can take their security behaviors to their home and help their friends and family, right? Then we all kind of benefit from that. But don't forget to tell them the why. So one of the things that I love to do with Enable MFA, I even have my phone named Hey Enable MFA. So if somebody's turning on their are looking for a Wi-Fi service, that I can, it's my hotspot name. But make sure you tell them how. So one of the things that I love to include and tell people is, there's a website called 2fa.directory, and it has all of the websites and apps on there. And then it has links to how you enable MFA for each of those things, right? So it's one thing to just say, hey, enable MFA. But if you don't tell them the how, they're going to freeze and they're just not going to do it, right? One of the things that I always love to recommend is, hey, a password manager, right? Make your passwords unique, right? So start with some of the simple ones, the important ones. Like, you're going to get overwhelmed if you try to do. I have over 200 in my security password manager. Start with the basics, right? Your email, your bank account, your social media, right? The things that are probably more highly targeted. And then just get in the habit of, every time I'm creating a username and a password on a website, that I'm putting in my password manager. Just start with the basics.
Is this the 2FA website that you're talking about? I've heard about this, but it looks so different. Is this it?
Yeah, it's gone through a couple different revamps. Okay. And actually, I found an article. I lost that link when I have all my new technology. But yes, so now you can, go into banking and look for a category that you are, that you want to secure your accounts, right? And so then it has links in there that takes you right to their page most of the time on how you can enable that feature on that application or account. A lot of times they'll have it within their Charles Schwab, right? If you go into Schwab Safe, then it tells you like how to enable 2FA or multi-factor, right? So
and they'll show you these check marks as like Alliant Credit, they have SMS, but Ali Bank has phone calls and SMS, and then some of these have one of these have hardware. Interesting. So Bank of America
has a token.
They give you a token.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. So I dig this. So I'll drop this link in for everybody so they have it down in the show notes.
Yeah, and I lost this link, but then I went to PC Magazine, and they have a whole article from, I think it was March timeframe, where they actually do screenshots with your LinkedIn, your Facebook, so it shows you how to do that. So, don't forget, when we're talking about all of these things, that we tell people the how. Right?
Yeah.
It's good to get on these mantras and have videos about why it's important, but don't forget to tell them the how.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Education is key. Well, Tonia, you have been a real joy. Before we hop off here, though, our guests, if they want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to contact you?
On LinkedIn, Tonia Dudley on LinkedIn. Go ahead and look me up there and try and connect that way.
And her information is below, so make sure you connect with her. Tonia, thank you again for being on the show. You are the best.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.